now.
You better watch out. I might have this figured out, huh?
Yeah, there we go. Now you can put it into presentation mode.
You're pushing your luck now, aren't you?
Yeah, I know. That's right. Going
All
whole
right.
hog.
Look at that. All right.
Bam! You're the man. All right. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well,
All right, and I'll shut up.
all right, my pleasure. Good evening, everyone. Hard to believe that I started my career before there were computers, so you have to give me a break here as I try to navigate the technology. But I've been around for about 42 years at UTC. I started out as a 19-year-old tool and die maker up in Hartford, Connecticut, working on Pratt jet engines, and have spent time in multiple businesses, both low volume, high volume, and no volume. I worked on the space shuttle program down in South Florida. That's the idea, no volume. So I've applied lean and continuous improvement in many environments, both domestically as well as internationally. I have learned that the tools and methodologies that we learn, whether it's statistics or whether it's lean or whatever you want to call it, it applies in all different business environments. Once you understand the theory and you have a pretty good grasp of the theory, and in some cases where it originated, then you can determine how to use that effectively in your environment, whether that's a manufacturing environment, a business process environment, financial, cruise ships, entertainment, medical, healthcare, and most recently this coronavirus, as you can see, has created a lot of opportunity for people to be flexible and adapt and try to increase capacity to provide both service as well as products to us. I hope they're applying lean, and that would help them be a little bit more effective. So I've tried to truncate this a little bit. I'm not sure what everybody's background is, so as Dr. Kramer said, feel free to ask questions as I go. I call this lean implementation. I've got a little acronym in here. Observe. One of the things I learned from working with the Japanese back in the 90s, we partnered with a company called Shingijutsu. These were the retired Toyota production folks that came to the U.S. to start their consulting company. And I was fortunate enough to be with Pratt & Whitney, a division of UTC that made a large investment in those senseis, as we call them. So one of the things I learned from them was the idea of observation. They don't work in a conference room. They don't work with PowerPoint slides. They go to the gemba, as they say. They go to where the work is performed, and they observe. And it's amazing what you can learn from simple observation. Standardize, obviously they're very keen in standardizing the process. Obviously that reduces variability and gives you a consistent output that hopefully meets customers' requirements. As they standardize, they look at what I'll call linkage and flow. They create linkage and flow through a series of Kaizen activities, rearranging perhaps the layout of the shop or rearranging the way things flow through a business process. I'll talk a little bit about Kaizen. I'll talk a little bit about layout, and then I'll do a little summary on what I think some of the characteristics are that you need to consider for lean implementation. When I say lean, if you think about the principles of lean as tact, pull, flow, and zero defects, obviously you can't be lean if you don't have perfect quality. So quality is embedded within lean. So I don't want to say it's lean or quality. I'd say lean is the overarching umbrella that covers all the different activities. So we'll kind of follow that a little bit. I would say too that when you hear people say we're embarking on a lean transformation or we're applying lean, some people think, layoffs. You're going to make things more efficient. I won't have a job. And if you go back to the days of Toyota, it was out of necessity. They didn't have the resources that we had in the United States. They didn't have the floor space that Henry Ford had, so they couldn't have doors and wheels and engines sitting all over the place. So they had to, out of necessity, be pretty lean. And it was a business strategy, right? How are we going to grow quickly? And they used the Toyota production system, which obviously incorporates a lot of lean to do that. If somebody's inviting you in to do lean just to lay off people, you don't need lean for that. You can have a layoff, right? But I would like to believe lean is a growth strategy. You're trying to free up capacity and grow the top line. In want to do that by focusing on what the customer values and eliminating those things that add no value, what we refer to as waste. And, on the right side, you'll see waste is anything other than the minimum amount of equipment, material, parts, space, and workers' time, which are absolutely essential to add value. So that's the efficiency piece, right? We can meet the customer requirement, but sometimes we're not efficient. So this is really balancing meeting customer demand with efficiency. I think what I've learned over time is that we're all trying to meet customer demand efficiently. And really, that's all that lean is. How do you do that efficiently? So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Why would you choose lean? I think those of you that have been around a little while, and it looks like most of you might not be my generation, but if you go back and kind of look at history, you'll see that I think the theory of constraints, The Goal, is a great little novel. If you haven't read it, by Eli Goldratt. I read that, believe it or not, in 1985 or 86 in a maintenance, repair, and overhaul business at part of Pratt & Whitney. Now, that's called the theory of constraints. And a lot of people learn from the Goldratt Institute, and they go out and they become theory of constraint consultants. A little bit later on came Shingijutsu, the Toyota production system folks. And then a little bit later on came Motorola, General Electric, and Six Sigma. And then a little bit after that came this whole idea of value streams. Now we're into things like Agile and Scrum. So you can see that the theory continues to evolve, and we try to take the different pieces of that theory and apply those most effectively. I would say at the end of the day, all of that could fall under lean, and you would apply it based on your particular requirement. But ideally, you want to reduce the amount of money spent on holding inventory. That could be one reason you want to do lean. Inventory costs a lot of money. You had to invest in that. It's working capital, and it's something you don't want to have hanging around if you don't need it. Safety, right? We could say that with less inventory, there might be less risk, at least financially. Could be more risk from a meeting your customer requirement. What do you think are some other reasons you might want to choose lean? Those of you that are in business today, or perhaps working somewhere, why would you or your company want to choose lean?
I think also just to be proactive. As we talked about, like what's happening right now, a lot of companies are having to lay people off and work without them. So I think if you're trying to be as proactive as possible and operate as lean as possible, these are potential layoffs you don't have to do in the future.
Okay. Good point. Others?
I'm thinking to probably improve delivery performance, turn product quicker to get it to the customer as much as you possibly can. Ability.
Okay.
Products. Being able to turn one line over to another or meet multiple demands simultaneously.
Good point. Okay. Confidence, anything from your side?
Well, he mentions to improve waste and improve processes, so that's the entire process of lean. So I don't really have much to say.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I would say, it's a strategy, right? It's a business strategy. And I think if it's done properly, it can be significant in giving you some competitive advantage, flexibility, speed, velocity, efficiency, perfect quality. All of that stuff has to happen as you apply lean. So to me, it's intuitive, but obviously to others that haven't been practicing for a while, it may not be. So, you want to make sure that if you're applying it, or the company that you're working for is applying it, are they applying it for the right reason, right?
Yeah. How often do you find that to be an issue, Steve? Top management support, we always know it's an issue. Do they really understand why they need lean? I mean, they hear the words, they hear it in conjunction with other jargon. Do they really understand it? Aren't there a lot of either they don't use it when they should, or they say they should use it and they don't understand it when they're committing to it. So there's probably a lot of unknowns on their part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And from my experience, there's a couple of things. Leadership is critical. So if you have a CEO or a vice president or a leader that values the benefits of lean, then you're going to be in pretty good shape. They're going to champion lean. Normally, those folks would have come up through a lean environment and learned it somewhere along the way with Shingijutsu or others, or they're in an industry where all the competitors are applying lean, like the automobile industry. What I've found in our company is when the leaders change, the appetite for lean changes. So it can be hanging on by a shoestring. And a guy like me who is nothing but SG&A, right, overhead, can be easily gone because the new CEO or vice president is not going to embrace it. Now, the reason they don't embrace it is, number one, they just maybe don't have the education they need and the wherewithal. The other thing is they've had a bad experience with it. And I would say that's on us. Folks like you and I that are responsible for learning the theory and applying it, we sometimes do lean for lean's sake or CI for CI's sake as opposed to CI for the customer's sake. And when you do that, it can get a very bad flavor when you walk around and say you must do this and you must do that because it's part of our CI system or our operating system. So I think in many cases, a lot of us are theorists, and we can sometimes do more harm than good if we're not careful. So it has to be very practical. It has to be very value added, and it has to be obvious to the leadership team or the senior leader that this is providing significant benefit. Because if it's not, why would they invest in it? So, Steve, it's an ongoing challenge that we all
It's
face.
it's kind of like a chicken and egg, right? Because if the leadership doesn't understand it, then you have to be given the latitude to show them. But you have but you have to be able to show them they have to appreciate it. But I think what I hear from what you're saying is you have to be careful when you try and show leadership the value of what you're doing to make sure there's clear business purpose and outcomes, not just because of CI's sake, like you said, but it has to make sense to them, which is bottom line.
Exactly. And if you happen to have somebody that has come through a company where they've had great success, then they're going to be your biggest champion. Larry Culp, I think his name is, who's now running General Electric. He came from Danaher. Danaher has something called the Danaher Business System. And if you go look at any of the GE, LinkedIn articles, if you go look up Larry Culp, he's a very strong proponent of lean. He's actually hiring lean consultants throughout General Electric because he has witnessed, and if you go look at Danaher's stock over time, they've done pretty well. He has witnessed the benefits that lean provides his company. So you see GE moving a little bit from the legacy Jack Welch, where everything was a Six Sigma project. If you wanted to get promoted, you had to be a black belt. And then you just imagine the amount of time and money they spent on Six Sigma, which sometimes is nothing more than sub-optimizing some process, but not necessarily creating velocity, Frank, like you said, and moving stuff through the system faster, right? So you spend a lot of time, a lot of energy just to move something from point A to point B faster. But it didn't go out the door, which means you didn't invoice and you didn't get cash back, right? So lean is really about velocity and turning your working capital over. So it's much different than, removing variation from a test yield. So you've got to kind of know when and how to apply the various tools.
But they don't usually put lean in the actual strategic plan per se. How do you see lean showing up in their, because they probably wouldn't even call it Hoshin Conry planning, right? They would just do their strategic planning, and the issue is how, where do you see the accountability and the leadership for lean methods or something like that?
It depends. If you're in my company, Collins Aerospace, we have matured to the point where we do Hoshin Conry, we do macro planning, we do include at all of our sites the continuous improvement process. So it is integrated now as an operating system, in some cases even proceduralized within the quality management system. Now, how Culp is doing that at GE, I'm not real sure, but I would guess over time it will become systemic and some sort of standard work will be put in place to drive that culture, to drive that tool usage methodology, and subsequently the outcome. You're right. You can do it systemically, or you can do spot point Kaizen, just like you could do a point Six Sigma project, right? So the more mature folks will have an operating system, the Danaher business system, the Boeing production system, achieving competitive excellence at UTC, the operating system, and then others will be running events or project type of activity. Okay? So all good discussion. So we get the idea of the value stream, and it took me a while as a lean person to appreciate what a value stream is, but if you think of a value stream from order to delivery, it's really looking at what is my demand, and do I have the capacity to achieve that demand in some given lead time? And if you get an increase in demand, can that entire value stream accommodate it? So you're always looking at capacity, and you're always trying to align capacity to demand. Now, let's use an example like this coronavirus, right? I understand that we need ventilators. So now we're going to go out and have everybody produce ventilators. But what if we don't have enough technicians or nurses or whatever they're called to use those ventilators? Then we suboptimize, right? We created a bunch of ventilators, but we're not able to use the ventilators. So when you're thinking about increasing capacity, you have to make sure that every piece of that value stream can accommodate that new demand profile. If I get all these ventilators, but I don't have enough trucks to ship them. If I have enough trucks to ship them, but I don't have enough people to receive them in. If I don't have enough, so you get the idea. And sometimes we look at just one small piece of the value stream, we increase capacity, and we say, hey, this is great, and we didn't think across the entire value stream. So you really have to think around the breadth. If you're increasing capacity, but your supply chain's not, what good is that? You're going to be constrained waiting for the supply chain. So you really have to think as a lean person, right? I got to have capacity across that value stream to produce what it is I want to produce. And really, that's one of the things Toyota, and I would say Porsche, is another automobile company. They're very good at something called line back logistics. So when they're creating the demand in their factory, they're making sure that that demand goes all the way back to the supply chain, and that supply chain can deliver it intact right to that drumbeat so that they can minimize inventory and costs collectively throughout the value stream. In the old days, we used to say, well, I'm gonna make the supplier carry the cost. Well, who do you think's paying for that? We are, right? What kind of a game was that? We didn't get it, right? Oh boy, look at me, I'm one up. You're paying for everything in the value stream. So once you start to appreciate what the value stream is, you start to think much differently. And then obviously, ideally, you see words like continuous flow, FIFO, first in, first out, creating pull systems. These are all some of the principles of lean that you would make sure that you're applying as you design a value stream. The other thing I'll say about value stream is that word design. And I think it's important that people don't understand it. But if you're an engineer and you're designing the wing of an aircraft, you expect that wing to behave in a certain way in its environment, right? Well, the same thing is true when you're defining a value stream, whether that's a Subway sandwich shop or whether that's a manufacturing shop or whether that's a law office or a doctor's office or whatever it is, you expect that system that you're designing to work according to the design. And if it doesn't, you should know why it doesn't. So I really look at the value stream as kind of the design phase, and then the physical changes in the cell or the office or the workplace, that's the next step to align to the value stream. You guys okay with the idea of value stream? And it's really something you define. Where in this value stream do I want to work? Where in this value stream do we have inventory building up? Where in this value stream am I getting hit with time? Where in this value stream am I lacking velocity? Right?
Do you find sometimes in value streams that they're, let's say, off kilter? In other words, we think we know what the value should be targeted at because we think we know what our customers want. In other words, you haven't done a good job of the upfront understanding the voice of the customer to know how your value stream should be targeted. You haven't listened. You thought you knew. I think that's a potential issue. You know, if you zoom right in, you think you're going. If you haven't validated or talked to your customers or had them involved, then you could be again, you could be just zooming down the wrong direction.
Yeah, I would say that the fundamental issue again is the demand number. So yeah, you need to work with your customer to understand what is it that they want to procure from you. What is what is the number per day? What is the different types of products that they're interested in? Because again, you got to design to meet those products. Let's take an example of a restaurant. You're going to open a restaurant in Fort Lauderdale. Let's say you're going to, I don't know, sell fish. So first thing you got to do is what? How many customers am I going to get? How many am I going to get for lunch? How many am I going to get for dinner? What's the standard deviation of their arrival rates, right? Some of that type of stuff. Am I going to buy a 500 square foot building, or am I going to buy a 2,000 square foot building, right? Because this is the service model in that case. So you have to understand what that demand is going to be. You're going to have to forecast that the best you can, and then you're going to probably design your restaurant with a little bit of buffer to accommodate those occasional spikes, and or you're going to accept the fact that some customers are going to walk away because you're at full capacity. So yes, what's the customer want? What don't they want? I mean, that's 5S'ing the menu, I guess, right? We haven't sold this in 3 weeks. Let's take it off the menu because I'm buying inventory. It's sitting in the freezer, and it's not turning, right? So absolutely, everything we do is around the customer because it's what the customer values, not what we value, right? So that's a great point.
Absolutely, and this value stream that you have up there, that covers everything that you have to do in addition to making your product. So, like, we manufacture aircraft parts. We used to do work with Pratt, so very similar business that you're in. And from the time order entry, it can even go upstream further to quoting, the documentation, how you communicate, order entry from one department to another, how you create your POs, how you design your manufacturing line. I mean, all that is included in this, in addition to your normal production product flow. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, because, especially in the design phase, Frank, and like you said, even the proposal process, right? We can't get proposals back to customers fast enough, right? Because that thing's constrained. So we can go into any one of these areas and improve them. And all of these areas must work well, be linked to the value stream, and have the capacity to accommodate demand. And you're right, we've for years just been looking at the manufacturing piece. Now we start to realize, well, shoot, that's not where our constraint is. Our constraint is in the back office, to your point. Maybe a CAD design engineer, or somebody writing the program for the CNC machine, right? We have the order, we have the raw material, we can't get it out to the shop, right?
Can't get the machines programmed.
Exactly. Yeah. And now what we're starting to do is, just like we spent a lot of time with the hourly folks and looking at their processes, now we're working back through the value stream. So if you think about it, we've been at lean in the U.S. probably, minus the auto industry, since maybe the 90s. I mean, really not that long. And there's only some companies that really invested heavily into it, right? So it's still a relatively new concept. And back to Dr. Kramer's point about leadership, there's very few leaders, unless you've gone through a program like yours, or you happen to be fortunate enough to work with Japanese or somebody like myself. Where do you learn this stuff at? You don't learn it on the job. Most companies don't apply it, right? They're just pushing product. They're just pushing product any which way they can. And they then have a tsunami through this value stream, right? Push, and it's just a tsunami that hits everybody. End of the month, first of the month, middle of the month. I mean, it's a mess, right?
So, Dr. Borchert, do you think that most companies don't implement it because they just simply don't know? Because we're all looking at it and seeing, okay, there's great benefit, we're working efficiently, we're not wasting product. So why do you think it is that most companies just aren't doing it?
Yeah, they're not aware of the potential. And I'll give you an example. I'm doing some work with a small company in Fort Walton. It's a mom and pop, maybe 17 employees. It's a machine shop, a lot of CNC machines. and now they have the son that's going to take it over. The son's probably in his mid-30s. Well, the son obviously is reading up on lean. He's watching what the competition's doing. He's getting interested, so they invited me down. Well, when you talk to mom and dad, who are the owners, dad is the brains of the place, right? He started by himself 30 years ago, and he's got everything that he's purchased in 30 years somewhere in that little factory. He's got 18 little compressors that are collecting dust. And I said, well, do you need 18? Yeah, you never know. You never know. So I said, can we get rid of some of this stuff? No. You never know when you might need it. So he's saying, hey, I've done a good job in 30 years. Leave me alone. I'm making money. And what he doesn't know is how much he could make. He doesn't know the potential. Now the son, coming into the next generation, he sees what he's got to do in the next 10 years. He's saying, I got to do something differently. And he's starting to, though he doesn't completely understand lean, he's starting to learn from me a little bit. So, yeah, most of these mom and pops and even big and small operations, if they haven't been exposed to it and have been successful in their mind, right, they don't need anything. Leave me alone, I'm fine. And by the way, you're gonna spend money for me to come in. They don't want to do that, right? To Steve's point earlier, Dr. Kramer's point earlier, that it's chicken and egg.
Cost, or they could have potential revenue, and then say, well, maybe lean is part of your answer in getting there. Then you may get their attention.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they're not going to know. If they say, oh yeah, I'm not doing lean because I don't like it, well, that's just, that's a stupid answer. That's just a gut answer. That's a feeling. That's not a fact thing. So you got to, I think, appeal to their logic and say, well, wait a minute, what's your business plan here? What are you trying to do? In 10 years, what do you want this business to be? Do you want to hand it over to your son at twice the size? Well, how are you going to get there from here with the competition around the world?
Now that would be somebody coming in from a business planning perspective, but they wouldn't see the lean tie yet, right? Because that would be capacity later.
Yeah.
So yeah, what market are you going after? Where you're going to get the sales dollars? I think that would resonate with them. The lean is really a little bit challenging, and I'll go through this a little bit with his case. But I think to answer your question, there is that lack of knowledge and that lack of potential. Unless you're like Larry Culp, who saw it and then move off to GE. Well, now GE's in the lean, right? They went from Six Sigma, now they're in the lean because the CEO is a lean guy, right? So that's an example.
That's like Andrew over at City Furniture, right? He went over, he saw religion, he helped his dad out, and now he's the president, and now he basically says what happens. And
it's a beautiful,
but if Andrew moved out, who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure his dad is such a zealot, by the way, and that's fine because his dad didn't live through it. His dad didn't have that strategy. His dad was successful. You want to do it, son, you go ahead and that'd be your thing, right? I've done my thing. So it is interesting how that seed gets planted. Now, there's something called a burning platform. And you take GE, he got a burning platform, right? Somebody told Larry Culp, if you can get the stock up 1.5 times whenever he got hired, he gets $350 million. So he got a burning platform, right? But how do you help somebody like Dr. Kramer just said? How do I help this machine shop, who, by the way, has been very successful in his view, develop a burning platform? There is no burning platform. Maybe influence, maybe some of this stuff. So, the burning platform is ideal if you can find that. Does that help? Okay. So let's just kind of plow through this a little bit. One of the things, around lean is the idea of waste elimination, right? What's not value, by definition, is non-value. And if you have non-value, you want to get rid of it. So on the left, you'll see an acronym, downtime. That's 8 letters. and it's really easy to remember these waste defects, right? Any quality, any turnback, anything, you want to collect that data. How many defects do we have in our system on a daily basis, right? Tons. Overproduction. That means you've made more than the customer requires. Now, the customer could be downstream of you, not the external customer, but it could be, I'm the purchasing, somebody created a purchase rec and it went to the purchasing team to create a purchase order, right? That's an example. Waiting. How often do you have to wait for something? Customers don't want to pay for waiting, right? Non-use of people skills. This is a challenging one, but if you have processes that don't require a skill, and it's kind of, I'll call it dummy down task, you should try to automate that task so you can take that employee and put them in a more value-added position. Transportation. You know, you think of the can of Coke. I don't know how much we pay for a can of Coke in the machine these days, $1.25 or something like that, right? But think about the iron ore. The iron ore comes out of the ground somewhere, gets put on a truck. The truck gets just transported to a aluminum factory. The aluminum gets made. That's the can. The can gets trucked to a place where they put some syrup and stuff in there. Gets put on a truck again. Gets put into a distribution center. Gets put on a truck again. Somehow ends up in the machine, and you pay $1.25. Well, how much of that is transportation that you're paying for, right? Oh my God, right? Crazy. And then the inventory of Coke all over the place. And then you got to pay probably a premium for the sports person that will do the advertisement on television. But you get the idea. Transportation, right? Inventory, work in process, right? How much inventory do I have sitting in my system that I'm not turning? No velocity. Motion or movement. People kind of moving around and walking around to get their job done. And then excess processing. Some of us like to do more than the process requires. We like to polish it, make it look nice, little dot the I, cross the T, when that's not really required. So all of these are forms of waste. Now, do you folks have any waste in your businesses that you can share as you look at this list here of downtime, wherever you work?
Of course.
Give us an example, Frank. Like what do you think might be?
I can run down the list because we manufacture. So right off the bat, the defects, non-conforming products, improperly filled out documentation, errors, creating documentation and work instructions. It's almost embarrassing because you go through it and you're like, holy cows, there's so much opportunity.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Inventory product waiting for a couple days to be worked on, and you just go on and on.
Yeah. Well, Frank, it sounds like some low-hanging fruit.
So what are the worst offenders from some of you out there? What are the worst forms of waste or the most pronounced form of waste that you have to deal with? I'm curious.
I work for a retailer, so they have, we have retail stores and we have a website, and like Frank, I could make a long list. I think one of the things on my mind right now is just our warehouse. So we have a lot of our system, the warehouse is on one system, and then in the corporate office we're on another system, and the inventory doesn't sync. So a customer can be ordering online, they order it because the website says it's there, but in the master inventory, which the warehouse has, it's not there. So that's frustrated customers. Product doesn't match, there are delays in receiving, and all of that it's money because now we have to order more to keep up with the inventory because they can't keep up with receipt, so that's wasted time and wasted money on inventory that we shouldn't have to spend.
Wow.
Others?
For me, the top of the line would be waste in inventory. So I have a ticketing business, and it's just people that don't proof things properly or things like that, and then the order goes through and you start printing, and then you realize that there's an error and we have to redo everything.
Okay. How about confidence? Anything from your side?
Yes, I handle transportation, and one of the common waste in transportation is the duplicates of orders, or sometimes overproducing certain orders, and it's a little bit taxing on that side.
Cool. Now, how many of you have a process to collect, let's call those turnbacks, or to collect that waste to do something about it? Do any of you have a continuous improvement process or a way to perhaps create a better future state?
Unfortunately for me, no, and I think that's one of the frustrating things. Like, you know, like we have issues with quality because we also produce our own garments, and it's frustrating to see a problem one season and then like you know, the next season you're seeing very similar quality issues, because you'd think, you know, we do have a quality department, but because of some turnover in that area, you're not seeing the changes. So it's frustrating to see that, like, maybe a zipper that hasn't been installed properly one season, and the next season it's a button, where that's really avoidable.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're not leveraging the golden nuggets, as I like to
Right.
say. But why do you think that is? Why do you think, because we were just asking the question, why do people not do lean? Why doesn't management see this? What do you think is preventing, you know, folks from, to Dr. Kramer's point, wanting to make more money or to take waste out of the system?
I think there are a couple of things. I mean, I would say it's a medium-sized company, and I think sometimes people fear what they don't know, and sometimes I think it's more comfortable to stay with the way we've always been doing it, because we have been growing, we have been making money despite these things, and even though these are big issues, we're still growing, we're still making money.
It usually hides a lot of sins, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just think also just fear of change sometimes. Like, well, you know, I think sometimes people are like, well, we've been doing this way, we've been growing. What would happen if we did it another way? Here's the unknown. So I think that's also something that people fear.
Okay. How about Frank in your business? Do you guys have a CI opportunity or a way to leverage some of that learning, or?
We're AS9100, so we Pareto and try and this year our mission.
I don't think like the ultimate customer, like we would be owning this stuff. I think if we took it more personally, I know when I was in defense contractor, it was hugely important for once a year for F-16s to do flyovers, because then the hourlies could see, for example, that these things that they're making, the radars going into their airplanes, these pilots are dependent on, and we're dependent on those pilots to defend the country. So it's hugely important. It helps personalize it. And I think maybe we get too abstract sometimes in the workflows. We don't see the final product. I don't know. What do you think?
My point, I think genuinely people really care. I really do. I think people are pushed. We're all in this to make money. Steve made a point earlier. If you're not running a robust system, you're going to get the wave effect. And I think every business, well, I can speak for my business, we feel that. If you're not running to a consistent or somewhat consistent process flow during a month or quarter or however your business measures, you get the ebb and flow. And boy, when it comes down to the dollar, you got to make your money. And if you're short, you're going to get pushed. And I see that all over. Case in point is Boeing with the 787. It's all over. And I think the people care, but I think you get caught in the middle, upper management sometimes, and they don't see some of the tools that, what if you do a little this? What if you do a little first in, first out? Put a few signs up. Hey, this is where stuff goes, so it's next in line. And a little bit of structure, a little bit of organization. I mean, geez, City Furniture, look at their warehouse, what they've done there, So, my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, but you're right. I mean, everybody's driven, and that's the difference maybe between the Japanese and the Americans, right? We're measured quarter to quarter, month to month, week to week, day by day, really, right? And you're right. Come hell or high water, you're going to make a number. Sometimes, hopefully it's not unethical, but, crazy things happen. But it is hard in our system, and it takes that level of maturity and I would say systemic thinking to say, hey, if I do this today, it's going to benefit me tomorrow, and that's the chicken and egg, Steve. And unfortunately, we don't have that many folks that grew up in it. But what's interesting is that I don't think any of you said you have a continuous improvement system. So imagine, look at the probability of all of us on the phone, and I'm sure we're working for good companies, you're making money, etc. I mean, just imagine what that career field could be when folks start to adopt it, and how competitive we could be, right? So it is kind of interesting that you're at the cusp. And I said this before, our industry called continuous improvement is still very young. You folks could be the theorists developing the next level of theory. I mean, it's only the Lean Enterprise Institute and a couple of Six Sigma folks, right? It's relatively new. And as more and more people, learn it, and more businesses begin to apply it, then those opportunities will present themselves. So, interesting data point. Let me just kind of keep going here because I've got a few more slides, and I know the clock is ticking, but this idea of go to the Gemba. I don't like to use a lot of Japanese terms, but this is where a lot of the Lean originated from. Gemba means where the work is performed. Why do you think we need to go to the Gemba? Why do you think if somebody comes to you with a problem, why would you want to go to where the problem manifests itself as opposed to a conference room? What's this whole idea, go to the Gemba? Does that mean anything to you folks?
I find, to try and understand something, you really need to see it. Be out there observing, looking at the equipment, looking at the person, looking at the environment, seeing what their day-to-day is, and whatever is going on in that process. You learn so much.
It is. It's amazing what you will see. You'll shake your head. You'll say, I can't believe what I'm seeing, right? But unfortunately, maybe the bigger the company, the more challenging, or the higher up in the organization. I can tell you that my company, we have, I can't tell you how many heads that are in these program positions solving problems with SAP data or roll-up data in a conference room. And they're telling me, here's the problem, Steve, and it's like, oh my God, they don't have a clue. Right? But they believe it, and honest to God, it rolls up, and everybody acts, and everybody goes forth. So one of the things I learned from the Japanese was go to the Gemba, but also every problem will manifest itself at the point of value add. So I think that's why the Japanese started with the direct labor on the shop floor. Because once they could see that, they could see whether it was capable or not. And they would see whether the problem was tooling, whether it was training, whether it was a part shortage, whether it was a machine downtime, whatever it was, would manifest itself right there. Then they could work their way back in the spirit of problem solving. So observation is critical. Frank, you brought up a point. We don't have time to do good root cause, which means we don't have time to go observe. We don't have time to collect data. We don't have time to get measurements, right? And you're right. I mean, I've been watching this for 30 years. It's comical. That root cause has to be in on day 30. On day 29, people put a fishbone diagram together. On day 30, they flip it over and say, okay, I met the requirement. Absolute waste of time. Don't ever do root cause if that's what you're going to do. Just accept the finding and move on, right? But you talk about waste within waste. But I like to think about a crime scene investigator, your policeman, right? If there's a murder in town, that's not going to be an easy crime to solve. But this person will spend full time, weeks, months, years trying to get to the root cause, trying to find that suspect. We're very, very poor at root cause analysis, and we don't even do it at the Gemba to begin with. We put a bunch of people in a conference room and say, what do you think? You got to be kidding me. You might as well ask my kids what they think, right? Anyhow, I really encourage us to go to the Gemba. I had a little...
Hey, Steve, what about the Gemba when it becomes a little bit more abstract? When we're talking about bringing it into white collar, you're not on the floor anymore. You don't see tools, you don't see materials. Things are more designs. You're talking about product development or supply chain management or marketing or some of these more esoteric functions. So what does a Gemba look like in that type of world?
Yeah, I would say it's no different, right? Let me give you an example. The proposal process. At our company, we have a lot of military proposals and the military is getting mad at us because we can't respond to the proposal. Now imagine, here's somebody who wants to spend money with you, and you can't get back with him saying, here's what we'd like you to do. So I went out and I kind of walked that process. I said, okay, tell me what happens. Well, somebody's got to look at the proposal. I said, okay, well, who does that? Well, it's a group of people. Well, give me a name. Well, it's Jim. All right, where does Jim sit? Well, Jim sits in Connecticut. I got to go to Connecticut and talk to Jim. Go to Jim's desk and say, Jim, how many of these do you have sitting in working process? He says, what do you mean? I said, well, Jim, how many emails do you have waiting to be processed? Can you show me? And I'm sitting there over his shoulder looking at his computer screen. I said, Jim, you got 1,000 emails you haven't even read yet. Oh my gosh. I'm seeing problems right away, just like Frank said, right? So, oh my God. I do the same Gimba. Now, sometimes it's a little virtual, but I have to interview. I have to ask the tough questions. I got to be the pain in the neck because I have to understand that process if I'm going to be the CI person that tries to help fix it, right? What I found out with the proposal, we had work in process sitting at every step. Where's the pricing? Pricing, I found out pricing had 2,000 in the queue. I said, you have a capacity problem. How many people are pricing? They said 2 people. I said, you need 6. So I had to go get 4 heads. But once I had the data, I could present that to management. Management approved the 4 heads. It must flow just like a manufacturing part, right? That's the Gemba. I couldn't let people tell me what they thought. I had to go see for myself as the investigator, right? There's no difference between a business process and a manufacturing process. The part doesn't know it's a part. The proposal doesn't know it's a proposal. It either flows or it doesn't. You find out where it's not flowing, bingo. You'll find out where you have imbalance. You'll find out where you have a capacity problem. If you want to, you can go and do time observations of the salary people too and say, hey, why are you taking so much time? Let's standardize this. There's opportunity everywhere, Dr. Kramer, but the point is you got to go to the Gemba somehow. You got to get, your eyes on the real process to become smart enough to fix it.
Well, I think that's very helpful. So Rasha and Shan, so what do you think? Are you guys able to get to your Gembas? Are you able to actually see the issues where you believe you can get closer to root cause understanding as opposed to just numbers? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there have been things I've been able to tweak on my own. Obviously, but with the company, the bigger the infrastructure, and the more you depend on outside departments, then you start getting stuck where you may need other departments, or you may need technology or certain approvals. But yeah, in some cases, yes.
Cool.
So for me, since the start of the year, we've actually implemented a couple processes, and we've seen where it's so far working, and waste has cut significantly. But do people get lapsed over time? Yes. So I think it's just a matter of just constantly checking to make sure that they are doing the processes in order to achieve the cut in waste, the reduction in waste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when we say go to the Gemba, the other thing is to do what we call a Gemba walk. And this is where a leader, I think, Rasha, to your point, would walk the process and see if it's working according to the design. And if it is, great, keep up the good work, everybody. And if it's not, that's where you have dialogue and say, hey, Rasha, I see the plan today was 40 of these, and I see we've only got 20. What do you think might be that problem? And then, Rasha, you would say something, and as your leader, I would say, oh, that's great, and we would have some dialogue. That's coaching. That's mentoring. That's being a servant leader. That's understanding your problems and how can we help overcome those. So you're right. If you develop the plan, i.e. the value stream map, the current state, the cell design, the business design, then it's got to work as designed, and you've got to know real time when it's not working so you can go fix it. Otherwise, you're going to lose capacity, right? And when you lose capacity, it never comes back. So if you were supposed to do 40 today and you did 20, it's not coming back. So if you don't know real time where that capacity went, you got a problem, right? It's a beautiful thing. A plan and an actual. A plan and an actual. A plan and an actual. It's that simple, right? And when you don't have the actual meeting the plan, you do real-time problem resolution. fix it fast, right?
Well, I think the coronavirus was a perfect example, right? We had 30 events planned for over the period of March and April. Coronavirus came and that's all gone.
Yep.
So now it's like, okay, how do we rebound from that? Because now we've lost all of that time. So what happens when everything gets back to normal? How do you rebound to try and make all of those up?
Yeah. Well, if they're events, Rush, I assume they're continuous improvement events? What's that?
Some of them, yes.
Okay. Well, again, you're going to decide and reprioritize, right? What do you have bandwidth for? The world changed. So this, we as CI guys and gals got to say, well, maybe I'm not the highest priority today. Maybe I got to go chip in somewhere else. But eventually we'll come back to normal, and we can get back on the horse and do our bit. But yeah, again, it's going to come back to what are the priorities in the business, and we got to go recover quickly, right? It's going to be tough. Yeah. Okay, so I did a little riddle here. We're running out of time. If you read this, man leaves home on foot one evening, walks to the corner where a man is standing. He makes a left turn. He walks again to the corner, sees another man standing, makes another left turn. He walks to the next corner, finds another man standing, makes a left turn to go home. He arrives back home to find two masked men waiting there. Who are they and why did he leave home? I can let you think about that for a long time, and you'll probably do what Dr. Kramer did and I did and say, I'm stumped. And then I'll give you this little visual clue that says, aha. Look at that, right? So when you go to the Gemba, things become very clear. They are not very clear in the conference room. I don't care how good you are at creating PowerPoint slides, go to the Gemba. So,
excellent.
Gemba tips. Even if you are under pressure for quick changes, take time to observe, right? Identify all aspects, not only the shop floor, but the business process as well. You may have to walk it. I oftentimes start somewhere and I start walking. And I'll walk and ask questions and look at things and learn as I go. Easiest time to create documentation is during the Gemba, so I'll take notes, I'll take pictures, I'll grab what I can, I'll videotape if necessary, right? Sometimes I'll look at multiple people to see how multiple people do the same process. And then I look for other opportunities as well. Normally when I get involved in perhaps implementation or starting work with a small company like the machine shop I mentioned, I may start off with something basic like 5S. Most of you have probably heard of 5S: sort, straighten, shine, standardize, and sustain, right? Because if you can't get 5S implemented and 5S reasonably executed, then maybe you're not going to go on to the more complex linkage and flow issues, right? So it's a good way to find out what the culture is capable of, find out what leadership's capable of, find out what the desire is, and it's also a change management challenge because you're going in and asking people to organize themselves. I just went to this machine shop I mentioned, and they still use their own personal toolboxes. And if you saw those toolboxes, you would see 30 years of stuff in this big roll-around toolbox. And I had to sit there and challenge, why do you need this? Well, you never know. And those tools, you can't have a standard process when you all have your own tools. It'd be like your own macro or your own scripts, and you're not sharing those with your teammates, right? You want to say, okay, what's the best way? What tools do we need to do it the best way? Okay, let's give you all the best way tools, right? So people don't realize the risk. You mentioned Frank ISO. Well, you can't have everybody using homemade tools and homemade jigs, and Jimmy's out. Where's his stuff? What's locked up? Well, I can't use that today. I mean, it's just chaos, right? No standardization whatsoever. No tool control for objects. It's just crazy, right? And they don't see that because they've been living that way their entire career. So it is a change management challenge, but I think it's a good place to start. And plus, you don't want to go start to rearrange a business with a bunch of stuff in the business you don't need, right? Just like at home. Let's do a little spring cleaning, then let's rearrange what's left. And that's really what 5S is, right? This is just an example. I'll go through this real quick. But if I ask you to count 1 to 49, it's going to take you a while. If we start to organize it in quadrants, it gets a little bit easier. We organize it a little bit more. Boom. Pretty easy, right? I can count the 1 to 49 real quick here, and I got all 49 in place. Boom, I'm good. Let's go home, right? Simple example of 5S. But, why do we want to standardize, right? Provides clarity, improves productivity, guarantees quality. Customers expect consistency. Certainly anybody from an ISO audit standpoint walking through your office and or your factory is going to expect some level of standard, either at the macro or at the micro, right? So it just makes sense that we want to kind of standardize, and that's one way we can do that. You guys get the basic plan, do, check, act. At the macro level, that's what we're talking about. What's the plan? I'm going to check, how are we doing? We're hitting it or we're not hitting it. If we're not hitting it, what we're going to do about it, and let's plan again, right? You guys have seen Legos, great example of standardization. They built their whole business around it. I've got a 12-year-old grandson that sits here at the kitchen table. He can put these things together in no time. That's a problem. I spent $100, he puts together in 20 minutes, right? What a racket Lego has, right? But, I mean, the directions are clear, the visuals are there, the colors are there, the standard is there. It's really, really nice to watch him kind of, put these things together, and they have enabled that through the way they standardize their standard work around not only the product itself, but the assembly instructions, right? Once we get some 5S under control, now we can move into what we call linkage and flow. So most of us that are in a business or in a business process, these things develop over time. If you go into any machine shop or any office and say, why is that desk there? Well, that's where John put it before he retired, or that's where Mary put it before she got promoted, right? There's no rhyme or reason. The business grew, they needed space, they stuck a desk somewhere, right? You might say, why isn't purchasing next to engineering? Well, there was no room at the time, so we had to put purchasing in the other building. So you got people walking back and forth, calling each other all day long, right? Same with the manufacturing. It just grew up over time. We got a new contract. We had to get 3 new machines, and here's where they went, right? So imagine if you got an opportunity to come back and say, let's lay this out to create flow. Let's create velocity. You would do that through things like value stream mapping, process mapping, and Kaizen. That's really what that's about. The process map is kind of like the task and activities. The value stream map at the bottom is more about where's my inventory tied up? Why can't I flow? What do I have to rebalance? How can I create a future state that's better than my current state? And value stream mapping is a very, I think, powerful methodology for us to understand what's possible when we get to the future state, right? You guys know process maps. I won't kick that around too much. Value stream maps are nice because at the bottom they show the process flow left to right, and at the top they show information flow right to left. So you need information to flow to enable the product to flow. I think a great example of a simple value stream is a Subway sandwich shop. You ever go get a Subway sandwich? Okay, so what's the tack time at lunchtime during the Subway sandwich shop? If I stand out in the parking lot and watch how often somebody comes out the door, that's roughly the tack time, right? Every 4 minutes, somebody comes out with a sandwich. But what's nice is it has continuous flow. Once you get to step 1, you go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and you're out the door. When you get to the condiment, somebody doesn't say, excuse me, I have to run next door to get the lettuce. The lettuce is right there. Everything is right there. Well, why isn't your business set up that way? You got people in different buildings, different sizes of buildings, different places, right? And everything stops. And when it stops, work in process builds up. And when work in process builds up, so does lead time, and you have no velocity. So why don't we put people next to each other, virtual or physical? Why don't we create workflow cycles? Put the finance person next to the pricing person, next to the legal person, so we can get this what did I say we were doing? Proposal out the door. Why does it have to go to 6 different departments? Sit in 6 different inboxes for 6 weeks. If I put you all together from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon 3 times a week, we can process these in no time. That's the beauty of value stream mapping, and that's the way we need to think about how we create flow, whether it's in the business process or the manufacturing world. Setup reduction, Frank, in your world, manufacturing, I think it's pretty obvious that if a setup takes too long, you might have a tendency to batch products to optimize the setup. as opposed to reduce the setup time so that I can produce the units that the customer needs that day. If the setup time takes too long, that's capacity. Again, you're burning up capacity. You're having more equipment that you need, more people that you need, right? So again, it's all about aligning capacity and demand. How about in the business process? Do you guys have the thought of a setup or what it takes to maybe go from one customer to another, or this product to that product? Do you have some examples where you have to set up to do your job? You ever switch from one contract to another, or one product to another, or one task to another?
I personally don't, but one of the things that the company I work for does is embroidery. So that's something that they have to, I know, account for when they're doing embroidery on apparel for accounts.
But Shana, that's more the manufacturing side, right, or the processing side?
Actually, no. It's actually post sale. So so buying the apparel from us and asking us to add. It's like an add-on, like a value-added service.
Oh, I got you.
Because they're like company logos and things like that on the apparel, or names or initials.
Yep. A little bit upselling. I got it.
Yeah.
Now, how about you personally? What is your role in the business? What do you do?
I do purchasing and planning.
Okay, so when you purchase, you come in the morning and you just purchase, and you don't move on to different tasks, or help me understand.
My role's all over the place, so I actually oversee the people who do that. But I'm kind of in a hybrid role right now because I'm also a subject matter expert for an ERP implementation system. So I hate it. This is my second time around getting stuck with this. So right now I'm leaning a lot more into processes that I haven't been involved with because I've been primarily on the retail side of the business, but now I'm getting more involved on the website part and understanding their processes. So I'm usually jumping around all day. So my work is not as standard as it was when I first started, because there's so much of just a learning curve, learning new aspects of the company, trying to help them document it, because as you move into a new system, the way they did things before, they can't do it going forward, and things have to change. So right now I'm trying to get all of that documented so that when we go through the training and we get people up and running, they're not wondering, well, this is what I did it before, and how do I do this now, and who do I go to for this, because roles have to change as well. So I'm not a good example right now because I'm a little bit all over the place.
You are all over the place. You sound like a utility company. Back to my baseball analogy. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then things like equipment, whether this is manufacturing or even, in your case, computers or things that you work on in the office. Is everything working when it needs to work? Do we have the proper training and skills we need 100% of the time? Are we optimizing our capacity? That's really what this is about. When you go into the office, it's really interesting because in the factory, I'll say, Jimmy, I see you're running machine A, but I need you to run machine A and B. And Jimmy will usually say, sure, you give me the training, I can run machine A and B. I say, great, Jimmy, can you run A, B, and C? Yeah, you train me, I can do A, B, and C. But I go into the office and somebody says, well, I'm a purchasing agent. Okay, well, can you do this? Oh, no, only purchasing. Well, wait a minute, you're an intelligent person. If I train you, can you do it? No, I'm just purchasing. I mean, it kills me, right? We've trained the hourly people to be extremely flexible and adaptable so that we can accommodate demand, right? And we can balance. But you go into the business, nope, I'm only a quality person. Wait a minute, you can't create a purchase order? No. I understand controls. I understand management controls. But that aside, we are living in smokestacks. I'm only EH&S. Sorry, I only do EH&S. Yeah, but we only have 4 hours for each EH&S stuff. No, I'm not quality. That's the other guy. Imagine the waste in the system, right? Because we're not utilizing our resources effectively. It kills me. Because we're very, very smart and we have, computers that help us, but yet we still live in this I am A or I am B and I am C. Instead of I'm an employee, I'd be happy to help you out. Great opportunity, right?
All right, it's almost 10 after.
Good. So let's wrap this thing up.
There you go.
About can make sure that these charts are available to Dr. Kramer if you need those. But let's summarize a little bit, because I was just trying to hit really some of the lean stuff, and then based on the theory, think about how you can apply that in manufacturing or business process. But implementation considerations, we talked about it, leadership. If you've got the right leadership, that's going to be pretty easy. If not, you've got some work to do, but you can do the work. We have a large influence, each and every one of us that are in CI. So you are leaders that can influence a large organization because you influence across the organization. A burning platform. Do you have a burning platform? Can you identify a burning platform? Can you help bring that burning platform to light? You can do that with data and some of the things y'all talked about. Competency development. Do we have the skills to do CI if we even have a burning platform and see the opportunity? So there's some training that has to take place in the organization, and obviously you would lead that, and you would be the ones that would initiate that. Resource allocation, Frank, I agree with you, or whoever mentioned resources. It's not going to happen by itself, so you may have to have a structure. You may have to start with a small Kaizen office so that you can engage people in continuous improvement and sometimes engage them in events or projects. Measurements, right? What are we going to measure? Dr. Kramer talked about that. Is it sales? Is it EBIT? Is it NITO? What's our baseline on these measurements so that we can show our value add, right? How am I going to make assessments whether we're improving in our continuous improvement journey or not, whether our culture is developing or not? There might be a way to assess that. And then you want to do all of this on a continuous basis, right? So I would say at the macro level, I created a little acronym called TEAM: training, engagement, measurements, and assessments and measurement. They're kind of buried in here. But those are things that I think are characteristics of implementation that you ought to think about. And then, how can you contribute to that? What are the barriers that are in place? How can you overcome some of those barriers? And then start on the small scale. Start with 5S.
Wonderfully supportive of our students and continue to be in our program. And we'd love to have you, virtually and physically in the area. So it's just wonderful to see you and to give our students. So, I'll offer for you that if they want to get in touch, I'll facilitate them getting to you, and they can ask whatever, whenever. And I know you're always there for them. So thank you everybody for coming. We'll have something hopefully going for next month. And this we'll just keep swinging. So everybody stay safe and keep your distance, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. And